Allison is the oldest, Todd is a middle child, and then Adrian is the baby. We call her Little Mama because she takes care of everybody. You know, she's the baby. She always did.
What was her first name?
Adrian.
Adrian.
Adrian. And, you know, it's interesting how you reflect. Just looking through the house, there were 3 children who grew up in this house.
Wow.
And these are the 3 children who now call this home. This is home.
Oh, wow.
And the similarities, as I found all these old pictures, I thought, oh my goodness, she looks like great-grandmother, or you could see the family resemblance. Okay, and then one of my favorites is this. My grandfather, Adolphus Petit, who built this house in 1911, loved his 3-piece suits. Okay, well, my father also liked his 3-piece suits too. Well, guess what? Todd, when he was 16, wanted his 3-piece suit. Okay. And I look at the stance. When you look at the stance and that little arrogant look or whatever else, I thought, yep. Todd never saw his great-grandfather, but boy, I see that gene popping out in you. You know, it's just interesting to see that. And then the baby looked like her, actually her grandmother. She never met her grandmother. Her grandmother had passed away before she got there. But I have a picture, and here again we start paralleling old pictures. This is my grandmother when she was a teenager, and this is our daughter on a swing here, and she was on a swing right next door because that was where she lived. But if you look, and it's hard to see, I know where you're sitting, but their faces, their bonal structure is so similar. She looks so much like her, you know, great-grandmother. Swinging on the swing, playing, you know, I thought, yep, I know where you got it. And then I started thinking about music. And one of, Becky helped me so much to get this done, Alfred Albus McDaniel, we really worked on him, didn't we, because he was a South Carolina dude. But the McDaniel family was my mother's family, okay, and South Carolina, whatever. And I was so glad. It was easy to find Daddy's, you know, ancestors because they were here in North Carolina, da-da-da-da-da, but I really wanted to tackle those South Carolina ancestors. And one reason I did, and for this presentation, is because they were the musicians. That's where the music gene comes from for the children. And once again, you have to look at where you got what and why you do this and whatever else. This is his son's fiddle. Right here, that we found, I hate to say, in the garage when Mother and Daddy we were moving them out of their house, and it needs a little bit of refurbishing. But we're talking a McGeaney 1617.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was refurbished in 1927. I mean, it's very old. And the McDaniels, of course, were actually from Clan MacDonald.
Oh.
Invergary Castle, back in the Middle Ages, was their clan, their dwelling. And of course, after the Battle of Culloden, they were accused of treason. Oops. And his ancestor, Angus MacDonald, had a choice of either being executed or he could be sold as a slave to the New World. And I'm not talking an indentured servant. I'm talking a slave to come to the New World. It was more like an indentured servant because they did have to work for 7 years. But I have several books on him. It's fascinating. He lived in Winchester, Virginia. I even turned George Washington down when George Washington wanted him to be a lieutenant colonel in the American Revolution. He said, nope, sorry, George. I don't like my superior officer. I don't think he's qualified. You know, these Scots-Irish were so independent. Well, look at where we live, at these independent Scots-Irish. But anyway, it was a family that loved music. Paralleling pictures, I played the violin and played in the symphony orchestra when I was in college at UNCG. Okay, and there's my great-granddaddy holding his fiddle. Okay, where did I get those roots? You know, think about that. And, but to have his violin was very special. I had to pull this out too. Music was important. Of course, they didn't have TV and Wi-Fi's and all that kind of stuff back in the 1800s. Right after the Civil War, and I'll just pitch this out, I found this also in the third floor attic. It's a roller gem, one of those, you know, organ rollers, whatever. And very primitive. Okay, I have a ton of these. Yes.
Wow.
that told the name, you know, the name of the song and everything. And unfortunately, this doesn't work very well because of, you know, it needs to be, well, I better not. But anyway, it does play a little bit. But this is a sweet story. Like I said, about 1870s is when these became very popular. Music was really taking a surge, folks, a major surge after the Civil War because it was so used. And this belonged to Lee Grant, who, and I have to quickly tell his story, he was the son of a former slave somewhere in the PG area. My great-great-grandmother, who lived in this valley, in this house right here, it's in the valley, it's hard to see that right there, but she was going into town, great-great-grandmother. And when she went into town, this child, 10-year-old child, was roaming homeless.
She's beautiful.
And she was, you know, he was roaming, didn't have a place, his parents had died, were killed, whatever. And she was one that reached out to everybody, you know, she was the mother. So she brought him back home to the farm here in the valley. And so he lived with the family. He was like family. Of course, he worked on the farm to help out. But he also was treated like a family member, and I'm very proud of her for doing this. Of course, it was after the Civil War. But he attended school with her children. Oak Grove School, which still stands right down the road here. That was Oak Grove School, which I've heard, I think is the oldest still standing school in McDowell County. But anyway, it was built by her husband, great-great-granddaddy George, so his children would have an education. And Lee Grant went to school. And then when great-granddaddy, when they divided the property up and he got his farm over here, Lee Grant came over to help him and lived in the house. He had his own bedroom, lived in the house, did a lot of the cooking, but he helped great-granddaddy as he got his farm going. And then when grandmother had her children here, she had 3 babies and she didn't know what to do. Oh my goodness. And so Lee Grant came over to help her. So he was really family member. And I love that story about him. In fact, when he died, he actually had a stroke in the old kitchen here in the house and was buried at Gold Hill Cemetery. That's where he went to church. But he was very much part of the family. My father has fond memories of him. But anyway, it's interesting with the past and the music. Now, back to the music. The 3 children, it was interesting. Todd, the son, loved the guitar. Okay, he got the musical gene. What did he like to do here at the farm? He loved to go play his guitar on the front porch. His buddies would come. They'd go to the 3rd floor attic. They'd have a band up there in the 3rd floor. Okay, they played their music. When he had an exam or whatever, you'd hear it quiet, then all of a sudden the music would play, and then it would get quiet again as he would study, and then the music would play. It was soothing the spirit, okay, calming the savage beast, so to speak. So he's our musician. He's still. In fact, multimedia, he would die today if he saw what I would. Mother, you've got to have this multimedia. I'll help you do it. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Because he likes his music and he writes his music. In fact, when he went to Emory, it was interesting. He loved his music so much that he and several of the guys got together and created Emory rock bands competition at Emory because he loved his music so much. Allison was a story lover. Okay. Grandmother McDaniel told the best stories in the whole wide world, ever. I wish I had written them down. You know, you think you'll remember them forever. You don't. But she was, once again, thinking about children and whatever. And Allison loved her stories. Okay, this is Allison over here when she was about 5 years old. When her father would write books, she would sit beside him at his desk and write her books. Okay, this is when she grew up. He was a professor in communication. She has to have her PhD in communications too, just like Daddy, and write her books as a grown-up girl. But what does she do? Her company is Play Science. It's a plaything for children, okay? Because of all the playthings that she did with her grandmother that played with them and played games and told stories. That's what she's doing now for children. You know, it's sort of interesting. And then, let's see. Oh yes, the music. Adrian, who felt her Scots-Irish roots, okay, where is that one now? Was a dancer. At 3 years old, she was dancing. She felt that, and she was the ballerina. Okay, she loved the ballet. But what was her favorite genre of music? It was Celtic. Celtic. She felt that. her senior recital, what did she highlight? The Celtic dances. She felt that. And you look at her with that red hair and that creamy complexion, that Irish whatever, you know. It's just interesting to see. And when you think about your family and the things that they have gotten from their ancestors, music being a part of that. Now, music, like I said, it was interesting. Somebody had gone to the district Rotary meeting somewhere mid-state, whatever, last week. I had a relative that did this, and she said, "You're not going to believe this, but the new president of Western Carolina College or University is a musician. He played classical Chopin and is a classical pianist, and he's the president of the university." I thought, yeah, fine, okay. And she was just shocked. You don't think about a music major doing that. Okay, and I have to preempt this by saying, when we started a humanities seminar in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, we felt like our gifted students, I was teaching a gifted program, needed more academic activity, whatever. So we fashioned after Davidson College here in North Carolina, their humanities seminar, where we did all Western Civ. We taught the whole gamut all the way to the modern era. And we did it holistically, the art, the music, the science, the math, you name it, we did it all, merged it together. And so that's what we did. Well, when we were sitting at our initial meeting, one of the teachers said, "Oh, we're going to have, what subjects are we going to teach? Science, math, history, da-da." And somebody said music, because that was my specialty. I was a music major. I had certification in music education. And she said, "Oh, but music's not an intellectual subject. It's just for fun."
Wow.
Well, I was getting ready to explode, as you can imagine, but my principal did it for me, thank you. And he said, "Oh, on the contrary," you know. He said it's a very highly academic, subject. So but I'm glad she did that, because that really, that got to my gut. And I thought, man, as we plan this curriculum, I'm going to show them how important music is. And I'm telling you this because it will help you as you move into the Civil War music, understand how important it was to the people. Because initially when I thought about Civil War music, it was pretty music, fun, da-da-da-da-da. But when I started thinking about it, whoa. Okay, Pythagoras, the 5th century BC, folks. Pythagoras was the creator of the first diatonic scale. Okay, yes. He created the Pythagorean theory of musical ratios. Now, with my 4th graders, when we studied the ancient Greeks, yes, we did the Pythagorean theory of musical ratios. Okay, we created the mathematical problems that he designed. And to show you this, I wish we had time to let you do this, because you would love to play with me. I like to play with kids. But initially, we would take straws. That would be the easiest thing to do. And you would, the first step, okay, this would be the base of the octave right here. You would take another straw, that all had to be this size, then you would cut it exactly in half. Okay, now listen to this. What have I created? The octave. 8 tones. And that's the E. And this was the octave higher. Okay, then you would do the 2/3, the 3/4, and by the time they got through, they would have created a panpipe that was perfectly pitched. Mathematically, they had done their math, because they had to do, the fractions, and they had to do the ratios and whatever. Now, the thing was, Pythagoras had the perfect scale. He was the mathematician. And the scale was, it really was sort of in between here. I can't play it. It was not, that was, Bach in the 17th century didn't like it because he thought it was a little dull, and he well-tempered his scale, and Bach changed it so it's the scale that we have now. He did it. But perfectly mathematical. And the kids would say, "Gee, that's off, that's off." I said, "No, kids, he did it perfectly. Bach changed it, a lot later, whatever." So he did that. Now, Socrates, about 100 years later, whatever, he and Plato loved education. He, of course, Socrates was a philosopher, and he thought education was important, that we needed to create, the culture needed to create education. But his theory, the Socratic method, which is what we used in our program, was not top down. You tell everybody what to do, and this is it. You dominate the conversation, that's it. No, I'm sorry. You ask questions. You make them energize and think and respond and get their minds working. Gee, that's brilliant, isn't it? We're not robots. We get to think, whatever. And so he created the first school, so to speak, education, where kids would go to school. Granted, they were boys. I'm sorry, girls didn't get to go, but that was back in the good old days, I guess. But the only two subjects that he wanted in his school was music and gymnastics. Discipline of the mind and discipline of the body. Yeah. If you've got that, you've got it made. Now, once again, music is your academic course. See where I'm coming from. But to him, music was history. It was math, science, poetry, literature, art, drama. Okay, think about it. Physical education, meaning the movement and the dance. Anatomy and physiology, when you think of the parts of the body that are used and whatever. I always talked about that when I had vocal lessons with children. Medicine, the healing aspects of music with the medicine. I know when I was in the hospital for 3 weeks after my surgery last fall, and they came in, the foot massager came in, I thought, are you crazy? Is this a resort or whatever? I'm in the hospital. And I stubbed my little nose, and then I thought, oh, okay, Sarah. And she said, would you like to put on some pretty music? And I said, oh, yes, I have a channel that I really like. So I would lay there in my bed in the hospital with the beautiful music playing. She was massaging my feet. The pain went away. And I thought, what? It really, really works. And I knew music was good for the mind. But here again, those healing things. And, of course, history. People didn't write down their histories back in the good old days. They didn't know how, a lot of them. But what did they do? They turned them into songs and ballads. Because the song would help them remember the story, and they would sing the song. When I taught in Texas, when we lived in Texas, and when the teachers with 5th graders would teach about the Battle of the Alamo, they would always come to me and say, Sarah, would you please teach the ballad of the Battle of the Alamo? Because the kids always do better on the test because they start singing the song in their brains. Hello? Okay. And then the psychology, the astronomy, when you think about the orbits of the solar system or whatever, the rotations, the rhythm and the pattern of the suns, the days, there was rhythm in all of that, so they were looking at it very broadly. And even the Greek gods, I have to go down that road real quickly. The founder of music to the Greeks was Hermes. Apollo, who was the sun god, was also second in command to Zeus, the big head dude, and he was also the god of music. Zeus loved to have Apollo play his music because it healed his headaches, his stressful headaches. Okay, medicine. I mean, this is just with mythology. Pan and the panpipe. Of course, they created the instruments, the lyres and whatever. And then, of course, music itself, the word comes from the word muse, the 9 muses. Okay, and each muse was supposed to represent something from music. What was it? Once again, history, drama, dance, poetry, hymns. Polyhymnia was in charge of the religious music, the ballads, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of where we come from, music, okay, and then it transpires. Now, when the immigrants came over here to this country, a lot of them came from horrible situations, a lot of religious persecution, things, like I said, indentured service. Some people came because they just wanted to come. But when they came over here, they weren't wealthy people coming over here. They came over, what did they bring? They brought their values, they brought their culture, they brought their music. And I wish I had copied this off, and I didn't do it. But there's a map that when I was looking up this wonderful article on the Civil War that showed the various regions and where these people settled, and I should have printed that out. But it was amazing, all up and down the East Coast. And they typically, as we talked earlier, settled where places reminded them of home. No wonder the Scots-Irish loved the mountains of Appalachian area because it reminded them of home. When Allison was in Germany for her year abroad, we were going through the near Osnabrück, Germany, where the ancestor who settled in this valley in 1811. As we were going through the valley, I thought, oh my gosh, that's Mountain Valley. That looks just like our valley. I thought, no wonder he kept migrating and migrating through Lincolnton. No, that wasn't home. He got here, that's it. It felt like home to him. Okay, and I'm going to use a little bit of music if you folks don't mind, if I can get that. Come on, do this. And I'm going to tell little stories to my music. I hope you don't mind. During the Civil War, when soldiers from across the country commingled, the multidimensional strands of American music began to cross-fertilize each other, a process that was aided by the railroad. Think about the railroad and how that connected cultures and areas. Army units included individuals from across the country, and they rapidly traded tunes, instruments, and techniques. The war was a motivator for the creation of distinctly different American songs that became and remained wildly popular, and Dixie being one of those. I mean, it was written by a Northerner, but they loved it all over the place. The merging of cultures because of the Civil War enhanced the beginning of American popular music. We have to remember that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, think about it. The Appalachian region was where many English and Ulster Scots immigrants settled, bringing with them the musical traditions of their homelands. Hence, ballads and the sounds of jigs and reels, especially as played on the fiddle, were innate to the developing style, which led to country and western music. Came from those roots. Now, the African-American spirituals progressed into blues music. Black musicians infused characteristics of the blues to the mix, and in a development that was the key to shaping the bluegrass sound. They also introduced iconic banjo to the region, to the area. What the African-American culture gave to us, the instruments that they brought over, the conga drum, okay, the bongo drum, all those percussion instruments, and the banjo being a stringed instrument. They brought so many things like that that we just adopted and used. And when you think about it, the minstrel music was created about the 1820s, okay, and actually that was started in Yankee Land in New York. And then, of course, the Civil War. After the Civil War, there were a lot of sad people. People had lost their homes, especially in the South. People had, families had died. And it was a time of sadness. So the blues music cropped out. They started writing music that was blues. And blues music was of the minor scale, the majority of it. And to show you what I mean, if we took Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and sang Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, how I wonder what you are. What a pretty little tune it is, how happy it seems to be. But if we put it in the minor key, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder where you are. Gee, the words go in the passion and the angst and the whatever because of that. And all that I did was to alter 1 degree of the scale. Instead of, I flattened that 3rd degree. Changing that one note alters. My daughter is interesting. She loves the country music with the ballads that have these sad, sad songs. She'll drive and she'll cry and she loves the drama of it all because she's a drama person, okay. And I thought, honey, I didn't realize you like country music. Oh, I just love the lyrics of the, into the words and whatever, because they were sad. Everybody was sad. It was a sad time. And then ragtime came out of that. Okay, we began to get happy again a little bit in the 1890s. Then jazz began to hit, and we're talking, a lot of this happened in New Orleans, okay, in New Orleans. And that was in the early 20th century, okay. Believe it or not, the folk music, that folk element, transitioned to country music in Nashville in 1920s. Country music began as we know it more today. And then the swing, getting into the sort of whatever, in the 1930s. Rhythm and blues, okay, we're beginning to mesh the African American and the Caucasian music, rhythm and blues, in the 1930s. And then rock and roll, 1950s, okay. Soul music, 1950s, okay. Hard rock, and 1960s. And then hip hop and heavy metal began in the 1970s and 80s, and I'll let you take the rest from there because you should remember that. But that was sort of the evolution. Not that I'm glad that we had the Civil War, but there was a good thing that came out of it, because what it did was to start and create American popular music out of all that merging and meshing and whatever. Now, there was, I don't know whether you folks have watched the Henry Gates Finding Your Roots, that series. I wish they had it this year, but I love those programs because Harvard professor, smart as a whip, African American. And one thing that he did in one of the programs that he did, it was an African American movie star, and I've forgotten who it was, but anyway, they were having trouble. No, he wasn't African American. It was someone whose ancestor had had slaves. And you could tell he was really having a hard time with this. Oh, he was embarrassed. There's nothing he could do about it. It was whatever. And Henry Gates realized the angst that he was dealing with, and he said, don't worry about this. You have to deal with history in the context of time and place. We can't judge it by 21st century standards. No, we can't. We have to look at when they were living, the conditions of what was going on, the situation at the time. You have to open yourself up to that. And I thought that makes a lot of sense. And it helped me deal with issues like that too, which I thought was wonderful. Now, let's talk about some Civil War, and then we'll start some singing. Believe it or not, General Robert E. Lee said, I don't believe we can have an army without music. Huh? Music fighting? What is the deal? Well, I loved it. It really is touching. The music comforted the soldiers. The ballads told their stories, happy and sad. They provided relief from boredom and stress. They even carried around the songster, the songbooks, the soldiers did, so they would have it available to sing. The music provided entertainment, fun, social interaction, kindled memories of home and loved ones, raised morale and patriotism, and the soldiers woke up to the bugler, went to sleep with the bugler, okay, and they marched to the drums and fife, which gave them that boost of energy and that togetherness. Both North and South used music extensively during the Civil War to rally the troops. They used it for recreation. They used it for their marches so they could stay together. Frequently, both sides would borrow each other's tunes or lyrics. Huh? Yeah, they shared. It was not uncommon for each side to serenade the other or for the battle to stop while an impromptu concert was held. They even had Battle of the Bands. Both Confederate and Union soldiers sang and often knew the same songs. Often soldiers would join the enemy in song as they passed by. The soldiers sang, whistled, hummed on marches while waiting for orders. The soldier had to be... Okay, we got some ragtime here. Thank you. We should have cued that a little earlier. The soldier had to be careful, though, not to tip their enemy of their location in case there was a sharpshooter they could get killed. So they had to be careful when they did their singing. Most regiments had a band. Regimental bands of the Confederate and Union armies served their units in many ways. They were highly effective in attracting new recruits and were morale boosters of the first magnitude, playing lively marches and quick steps to lift the spirits of war and the weary soldiers on the march, and also to inspire the soldiers just before and sometimes during battle. The military bandsmen also served as medics or horsemen, assisting surgeons in field hospitals and helping to evacuate wounded soldiers or to bury the dead. When soldiers were in camp for long periods of time, they were entertained regularly with concerts and serenades by the band. At these performances, musicians demonstrated their musical and technical skill by playing their most difficult pieces. Sometimes the two armies were so close that a band on one side could be heard in the opponent's camp. During the 1840s and 1850s, many town bands had attached themselves to the local militia, wearing their uniforms and participating in annual or semi-annual musters. Their petition was highly valued because bands were so helpful in recruiting civilian soldiers. When hostilities broke out in April of 1861, both sides were both busy organizing volunteer units, and the militia bands were in such demand that many commanding officers paid large sums of money to procure a good one for their regiment. Many bands enlisted a complete unit because the music was that important. Prior to the Civil War, the U.S. Army regulations, also used by the Confederate States Army, authorized each regiment to enlist up to 16 men to serve as musicians. Photographs and muster rolls show that bands varied from 6 to 24, with an average of 12 to 16 musicians. You don't think about that. Most bands used only brass and percussion instruments, although occasionally they might have had one or more woodwind instruments as well as cymbals. Cymbals were very important. Civil War band music may be divided broadly into three categories: martial, dance, and popular. The martial was the marches, the quick steps, and the patriotic airs. The dance were the polkas, the waltzes, the